the brand and consumer insight practice at Future Brands, a marketing consultancy based in New Delhi, India. She began her career as a clinical psychologist before moving into the world of branding and consumer insights, and her paper, continuing this political theme, is Subverting the Rational, the Breaking of Brand Modi. Sorry, I'm going to go this way.
It's only befitting that Trump should follow Modi, considering they have just been professing their great love for each other. So he's his true friend, and there's a degree of comfort. It's also interesting that how Modi is, the Forbes most trusted leader. I don't know what, the scores for Trump are also, I think, pretty high. And in today's context, I think it's very interesting that, what, preceded this, the concept of the fact that if you try to work out Modi, you can't work him out linearly. So it doesn't follow, the cause and the effect or the action and the reaction. It is, it's these packets of meaning, episodes that sit side by side, like the kaleidoscope, and come together to make a holistic sort of meaning, and something which I think that it's a completely new kind of a way of making meaning that we see. This is one of the first times that we have seen in India a prime minister who's treated like a rock star. Usually they're very boring people, and not people that you want to take selfies with and have this whole fan club thing happening. Again, this is a first that where a politician actually sort of has an influence on the kind of fashion discourse, introducing items of clothing. This is the Modi kurta, and it's a little variation on the traditional. It's got short sleeves. It is the workman's kind of short sleeves, and there is a whole lot of excitement around this. It's interesting that, he has the great sort of myth about him goes that he has actually come up from being a tea boy. So from a very, very poor family, working in, small little tea stalls. And now you see a certain, extremely well turned out, there is a look that is constantly created. The first one, the white one, is his newest Israel look, I'd call it. And if you see the last two, these are, it's got his initials and his name woven into the fabric. So extremely narcissistic. He came in for a lot of criticism for this. So it was quickly abandoned, but, the look changing goes on. And it's actually a whole lot of, the country, the masses takes a lot of pride is that one of us is out there representing India and right on the world stage. So it's a whole lot of hope, and there's a lot of good feeling about it for him being well turned out, majestically turned out, And it's also, this whole politics of, he addressed President Obama as Barack, and there's a whole lot of thing about he's hugging every world leader when he goes, and he's had a prolific bit of touring the world, 64 countries, and still counting. So this thing of, this familiarity and this whole, very, very grand presence on the world stage is something that, is the politics of stature. We were talking about how, there is a disconnection now between a particular episode and the next, and that's so clear in the way that, you see the rise of Modi. Wasn't too long ago in 2002, and there was a lot of international criticism for it, his role in one of the most horrific riots. And now you see him, completely sort of rock star proportions, so many people turning out to listen to him and cheering him. It's almost like, the past and the present have become disconnected, and you don't see any carryover of that. So how does he actually manage to make meaning? How does he kind of, go about reconciling this, if, reconciling and consistency is still something that, we look at in a narrative now. And the two axes that are particularly relevant for looking at Modi is how he plays on the class codes and the gender codes and, sort of conflates the two. This is again like, there was a lot of outcry on this about, almost mirroring Mahatma Gandhi's picture and this whole association with Khadi. It's particularly ironic because for Gandhi, it was a symbol of frugal living that, whatever you spin and whatever little that you manage is something that you consume. And what Modi does is actually, it's moved away from that symbol. It is about a lot of, capitalism. It's about consumption. It's about prosperity rather than frugality. It's this whole subversion. It is taking over a symbol and signaling a new era while, placing himself at that kind of a platform with that kind of stature and a certain subversion of what frugality and simplicity means today. Again, what is part of the Indian sort of mythology, that when there is greatness, and I think it's also part of the Buddhist thing, that when there is greatness, when you want to leverage this whole thing of somebody is destined for greatness, there are these childhood stories. So there are these childhood signs that that signal greatness. So again, it's this myth of the tea boy to prime minister, that born in a humble home, destined for greatness. It takes for those of you who are familiar with the whole Krishna myth, it is exactly that. As a child, there is signals of greatness. And these are actually comic books that are very popular in India, which is about great personalities, to get children acquainted with the stories of great people. And it's, so this is the second one. I've just taken a scene from that, which is about him actually picking up crocodiles and walking into crocodile-infested waters. God knows where that really happened. I think this is one of the key ways that this sense-making and somewhere is about how he recasts a negative impact. I'll just give you a brief background of what you see is, these serpentine queues at an ATM. One of his big dramatic moves was demonetization, which, he made an announcement at 9 o'clock at night, and by 12 o'clock, 85% of the currency of the cash in circulation just went out. So it was absolutely hugely disruptive, so which meant that the next day that you want to go and buy something, and we are largely a cash economy, suddenly, there was no money to buy and there was no business to do. And, so it actually impacted business, it impacted people's lives in a big way. And the fine thing is that there was very little backlash, about it. In fact, it was made a lot of sense to a lot of people, and they welcomed it, because somewhere this was aimed at, we are rooting out black money and corruption and funding for terror groups. So what was suffering actually became sacrifice for the nation. So it is the discomfort that is something which makes a great deal of sense, which is for a higher purpose. So it suddenly gets somebody with like his small little gesture for something big. Also this, thing of, we all love freebies from the government, and, damned if I'm going to give it up, even if I don't need it. But this is actually giving up a subsidy, paying more, and feeling good about it. Another thing of, what was touched upon by this, in his speeches, Modi uses a lot of mnemonics. And this is about making sense, and the kind of sense that you want sort of committed to memory. I think we've all used mnemonics to remember our trigonometry formulas and such like. As it's kind of like committing to memory. It's, making sense of abstractions like, taxation. GST has just come in. So it becomes a good and simple tax. So never mind all the confusion, never mind all the disruption. The meaning that's taken away is that it's simple, it is good, and that's what this tax is. So even if you don't understand what the huge mechanics of it, it makes sense to you. How do I understand India's, how is India going to become great? It's 3D capacity. It is democracy, demand, demography. And 3D is a popularly understood word. It's a popularly understood term. Repositioning this whole VIP culture as every person is important, EPI. So VIP gives way to EPI. And there are hundreds of these things. So his ability to, simplify, get into the context of the person, of every common man, and to make sense of policies and other abstractions. It's also, all his measures are something that it touches every person sitting in his home. So whether it's demonetization, whether it is any of these things, you as an individual experience it. It's also, if you see that his ability to polarize, it is, uses the structure, of binaries. So it's always this versus that, and it's about, which side are you on? And the answer is often, which side should you be on? This is, this quote is just an example of, how the codes of gender and class become conflated. So in one stroke, when you say, it's the effete intellectual versus the power of the masses, it is about the elite, the educated, being effete, being feminine, being ineffective, which you see, there's a very typical remark, and the power of the masses being masculine, hardworking, and, empowering the lot. This is the leader of the opposition, and essentially the discourse is in the area of masculinity. It's the boy versus man. It's also the Indian idea of masculinity that he leverages, which is, he is not known to be married. And he appears in public more often with his mother than the wife. And it's the yogi, it's the ascetic, it's the celibate, it is the concentration of masculine power. And that is what gives this whole, almost mythical and demigod-like power to make things happen. And all the policies, you can see that, these are some of it's thematically based on cleansing, which is, whether it's Clean India, which is rooting out corruption. It's also about purging history and the historical wrongs, which Muslims, and that's the most popular binary that is used. It's the color of saffron, which is the color of asceticism, also the Hindu right wing. It is this masculine thing of, in the face of criticism, in the face of sometimes good sense, it is tough and fearless. However, it's not a single note of masculinity. What you see is the softer side. It is this, him kissing the stairs of the parliament. It is the tears of the warrior. This is a lovely thing where he uses the medium of the transistor, the radio, which reaches out to every common man. And this is a very, very, your daddy talking to you, he tells stories of, his travels across countries. He talks about everyday little things about, it is summer, you should pour out water for the animals, and about a lot of softer this thing. So it's a completely different side of this hyper-masculine person that you see. So what are some of the lessons for the brands here? The first thing is this amplification. We've spoken a lot about amplification today, but the way that Modi uses it is through, amplifying the masculinity through glimpses of the feminine. And contrast is a device that he uses, this poor boy to this world-traveling sort of leader. So everywhere there is a use of, another subtext to magnify the other. You see the simplicity. There might be a complex interweaving of codes, but the interface is a very simple binary, this or that. So it's a very, very user-friendly, and how do I process it, kind of an interface. it is scale. It is the sheer, dramatic impact of numbers, of, big strokes. It is, and there's an important one that, how he creates distance and awe and the following, the blind kind of, following that he has. He is always in charge of the communication. There are these big scale of, he addresses the nation. You don't see him, dialoguing, doing interviews, speaking that much in parliaments. He decides, he chooses the time and the place to talk. And this is, I think it's an interesting thing for brands to do, that when the brand speaks, it really should be an event. Starting point for new age brands. Thank you.
That was so interesting, and I have to say that these two papers are making me rather depressed about the world. I think we have time for one question.
Thank you, very interesting. I'm particularly interested in this example. You spoke about the kind of removal of the currency and the reframing of this suffering as like a sacrifice. And I'm thinking a lot about George Lakoff talks about the use of kind of linguistic frames to really take control of the discourse around political issues. I think a good example of this was when you spoke about the GST as a good and simple tax. But I wondered if there were any interesting ways in which this removal of the currency was described, was presented to the population that kind of suggested this kind of reframing.
He did not, nothing popularly that was used. The mnemonic thing wasn't really used in case of this demonetization. What he did was actually really play this whole emotional thing of that we are going to, root out funding for terror outfits, and there's going to be this big scale. And there's this thing of momentousness that he creates around and your participation in it. I think that's what he was really playing on. It's about going out there and touching your life. I don't think any leader has actually done that, because policy abstractions stay there and your day-to-day life really doesn't change, which is not the case with him. Good, bad, ugly, it touches you in a very real way.
Thank you.